tell us what you're all about and tell us about these town halls that you've been putting on and why they're so important.
Sure, thank you, Matt. The Momentum Center is a grassroots movement to create a stigma-free community, and we do that in three different ways. One is by operating the Momentum Center for Social Engagement, which provides social and recreational opportunities for people with mental illness, addictions, and disabilities. Another is through cultural immersion experiences. And then the third way, and what we really started by doing, was providing a space for community conversations to talk about matters of social justice and human rights. And when COVID happened, we of course had to change a lot of what we were doing. We stopped doing our community conversations for a while, which included town halls, because we really have always focused on the small group conversation. So it was only after I learned about the breakout groups in Zoom that we figured out that we could actually do our town halls again. So we pivoted to a virtual model and we started talking again about COVID and mental illness. And then we realized COVID was having a disproportionate effect on communities of color. So we started talking about racism and public health. And that led to a conversation about race and racism in general. We convened the Anti-Racism Task Force, started having monthly town hall meetings to talk about race and racism. And when we started this new year up again this fall, we started with a focus on religion and racism. And in the process, really came to understand that we had overlooked a big segment of the population when we talk about race and racism, which is Native and Indigenous people. That was an oversight on our part, and we needed to correct that. So our religion and racism series expanded to include the effect of Christianity with Indigenous and Native people. And now we have the opportunity to speak in February about Indigenous people and the land.
Levi, that's a perfect segue to you. Talk to me a little bit about why that is such an important topic that people should know about and have discussions about.
Well, Native people, this has been our land for centuries and centuries, and we are really happy with the land acknowledgement that's starting to take place. Many times you go to events now, even some sporting events, graduations from colleges, people will acknowledge that they're on tribal land. And I, as a Native person, I just think it's wonderful because our ancestors certainly worked very hard to protect, to preserve the land for generations, land and even waterways. So I love this topic. This topic is very important to Native people. There's a movement across the United States, land back. Some tribes are actually buying back acres and acres of land so that they can have a homeland again. If you really get into the land acknowledgement and see all the properties that go with it, so to speak, you'll understand it's so important to take care of the land. And I think once you go back to the Native people and you acknowledge it was our land, it's incumbent on this generation and future generations to really take care of the land. And by that, I mean, from environmental concerns, climate change, on and on. It's very important.
So, you are taking part in this this town hall discussion coming up. What do you hope people take away from it? What are you hoping people walk away from and saying, wow, I learned that and that was very impactful to me?
Well, I think it's important for people to really show the respect that's due to Native Americans right now and even in the future. So often we have been ignored, put aside, and it's showing up in our healthcare, housing needs, on and on. And I think the more people really create the awareness around Native people that we still exist, to me, it's really important so that we can be have better lives and interact with our other brothers and sisters of all colors.
Barbara, you looked like you had something to add to Levi's last question about, what do you hope people take away from this?
Well, so one of the things I do hope they take away is a greater understanding of the effects of historical actions. It's really easy for people to decide things that happened in the past are in the past, but they resonate into today's future. We have generational trauma that continues and continues. And unless we really start addressing the pain that we have inflicted, we can't bring healing to that. So we need to be aware. We need to uh, use that awareness to leverage our abilities and our power and our status to be able to make change.
You know, these have been going on, these virtual town halls. You alluded to that as part of your plan during the pandemic. Do you feel like, you know, is there any evidence that you're like, wow, we've made an impact. It's working.
Yes. So that's a great question, Matt. One of the things we're most interested in trying to measure is the impact of our conversations. So if we're not having any impact, why are we doing it? One of the keys, though, to our conversation is we really try to position ourselves to create a larger and larger funnel to bring people into the conversation who haven't necessarily been part of the conversation before. So we work really hard to create that safe, shame-free zone where people can talk about the things that they've been carrying around with them and unpack that and figure out what they want to continue to carry and what they don't, that we have to bring this stuff into our consciousness so that we can make conscious choices and not just be caught up in the privilege and the bias that many of us in this community have been raised with. So there's both the individual impact of just bringing people into a conversation who've not had it before, and then collectively, there are actions that have come out of the town halls. The last question we always ask is, what can we do as individuals or as a community to create a more just and inclusive community? And we have the anti-racism task force that looks at the suggestions that comes up and then figures out what we are able to do or what we might be able to recommend to organizations that are working specifically in these areas. So as a result, we've had some conferences. We have another conference coming up. I've started a conversation with Levi about hopefully an event around mental illness in Native and Indigenous people. I think in this particular case, one of the things that we have to realize is the impact on people of having taken their land. What would it mean to have lost your land? What does that do to your sense of place and belonging? And I think as individuals, we have to wrestle with that if we really want to get serious about how to create a more equitable and just society for everyone.
What am I missing? What do you think really people ought to know going into this?
I do like to mention the fact that it is about having a small group conversation. So we have incredible speakers, and I feel so uh, really honored to have Eric Hemingway, Levi Rickert, and Kevin Locke all as our speakers. It's an incredible panel. And they will each speak. And then we have this wonderful opportunity for Q&A. So that chance to ask the questions that you just didn't know where or how to ask before in a way that will be welcomed and nobody needs to be embarrassed. And then we go into that small group. So you have an opportunity to really process what you've heard and think about what did I learn? What surprised me? And then reflecting on how this might have affected me. It's that empathy, right? Learning, as Levi was just saying, from somebody else's experience, learning another story. And then we have our action plans. What are we going to do as a result? So I also hear on one hand, we have people that don't want to engage in the conversation because they feel like it should be left in the past. On the other hand, you have people talk about, we've only been talking about it, and I'm tired of talking about it. And I think really change comes relationally, and relationships start with conversations. And so this is a place to begin forming those relationships, which ultimately creates change.
Levi, how about you? Is there anything you can think of that I'm leaving out?
Well, I think that oftentimes as the editor of Native News Online, I get comments from our readers that say, why didn't I learn about this in school? Why didn't I learn about, why am I just hearing about it now in Native News Online? But there again, it's about education. Education is so powerful. Education, learning about one another's cultures is just so powerful, and it can really work towards healing.